Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Eleanor Wiliams grew up on a farm in Southeast Virginia and spent the first 18 years of her life there, never going farther than a couple of miles from her home. She was a homebody, and as she admits, she was sheltered. At 18 years old, Eleanor gave birth to a baby girl and found herself being a young single mom. She adored her beautiful baby, and she named her April Nicole. Just after the baby was born, Eleanor decided to make a trip for the first time in her life. Her older brother had been stationed at Fort Riley in Kansas, and he had a friend named Kevin to whom Eleanor had started talking and writing to. Eleanor was going to take the bus from Virginia to Kansas, and she was taking her newborn baby with her. She was excited not only to meet Kevin, but to travel and leave Virginia for the first time ever. Eleanor traveled by bus for a few hours before reaching her first layover stop in Washington, D.C. They would be there for a couple of hours before continuing on. While waiting there, a friendly woman approached Eleanor, telling her how beautiful her baby was. She asked if she could hold the baby, and Eleanor said yes. Eleanor, at age 18, was a bit naive. She had never been away from home. She was a young and anxious mother, and she was trusting. Eleanor would not be trusting anymore after this day. This woman told Eleanor the baby needed to be changed and said she would do it for her. She walked away with baby April in her arms and never returned. April Nicole Wiliams had been abducted in broad daylight, with several witnesses seeing this interaction. Baby April hasn't been seen or heard from since. Where is April Nicole Wiliams? And welcome back to the Where Are They podcast and another unsolved missing persons story. This bonus episode today is a little bit different. This was a baby kidnapped in broad daylight from a young and naive girl whose only mistake was to trust the kindness of another human, or at least what she had perceived as kindness. That tragic day in December of 1983 changed lives forever, and the fate of baby April remains a mystery to this day. Thank you so much for supporting our show and our mission to share these stories. There is an ongoing database of tens of thousands of missing persons at any given moment. The sheer number is actually astonishing, and continuing to raise awareness is so important in these situations. Baby April did vanish almost 41 years ago, but the manner in which she was kidnapped leaves many to believe that she was taken and raised as someone else's child, meaning April is likely out there living her life having no idea that she was a kidnapped baby, no idea of her real family, and no idea of her given name. In addition, Eleanor's entire life had been altered forever because of that one moment in time. Eleanor Wiliams was just 18 years old when she gave birth to her daughter on August 17, 1983. She named her baby April Nicole, and she was ecstatic about being a mom. Eleanor had lived her entire life in Southeast Virginia without ever going more than a few miles from her home. This was a new phase in Eleanor's life, and while she admits that she was nervous, she was completely in love with her baby girl. During this same time, Eleanor's older brother was serving in the Army, and he was stationed at Fort Riley in Kansas. Her brother had introduced Eleanor to a friend in the Army, a man named Kevin, and Kevin and Eleanor began writing to each other and started talking. That December, Eleanor decided to take April and go meet Kevin and visit with her brother in Kansas. This would be the first time Eleanor would leave the state of Virginia and travel on her own. She was nervous and she was excited. On December 2nd, 1983, Eleanor boarded a Trailways bus with April in her arms and started her 1,300-mile journey west. 3 hours into the ride, the bus stopped for a layover in Washington, D.C. Eleanor got off the bus with April and found a place to sit down. As she did, another young woman approached Eleanor, telling her what a beautiful baby she had. They struck up a conversation, and this woman, who had introduced herself as LaToya, asked to hold April, and Eleanor handed her the baby. Now, part of the problem is Eleanor was possibly too trusting. She was young and naive, and LaToya seemed super friendly and sweet. Anyone who has been in public with a cute little baby has been approached by people telling them how cute they are. Usually, that's the end of the story, however. Now, there are 2 different reports as to what exactly happened next. This was back in 1983, so it's not always as easy to get the exact details, but I will share both versions with you. Story number 1 is that LaToya was holding April and noticed that she needed a diaper change. She told Eleanor that she needed changed, and she offered to change her for her. Eleanor agreed, and the woman walked off with baby April. Eleanor thought they were headed to a bathroom nearby, and she waited on the bench for them to return. After about 10 minutes and no sign of the woman or the baby, Eleanor began to panic. Searches for this woman named LaToya turned up nothing. April had been kidnapped. This story is the one that is reported most often from what I have found, but I do have more questions about this. For instance, did LaToya take anything with her to change April? Was there a diaper bag, or did LaToya give her a diaper to change her? The second story is that while LaToya was holding the baby, she just turned and started walking away, never saying anything to Eleanor at all. As Eleanor started to ask her where she was going, the woman started walking faster and faster until she disappeared out of sight. Again, searches for this woman and the infant turned up nothing. Now, a lot of people have come out and questioned the validity of any of these stories. But while there was no surveillance camera at the time, the police reports stated that there were several witnesses. Because of this, I think we have to believe that April was indeed kidnapped and that Eleanor's story is true. When police began interviewing people, they did find a bus driver leaving the bus terminal shortly after that, where a woman had boarded the bus carrying an infant. He said he remembered the woman got off at the Prince George exit. It is quite possible that this was LaToya and April, although we can't be sure. It could have easily been another woman and a baby, but it definitely seems plausible. Searches over the years turned up nothing. No signs of April or LaToya. Authorities did release a sketch of the woman who called herself LaToya, but still found no leads. And it's most likely that LaToya was not her real name. Because of the way the kidnapping happened, many, including Eleanor, believed that this was a woman who wanted a baby and was going to raise April as her own. This is what she wants to believe, because this would mean that April was hopefully loved and cared for and is still alive out there, completely unaware of her story. Eleanor did go on to have a brief relationship with Kevin, the young man she was going to visit in Kansas when April was abducted. She had 2 more children, and eventually she and Kevin broke up. And she would move from her farm in Virginia to a completely different part of the country. She said that life was never the same for her after the abduction. Not only did she suffer immense depression and nightmares from what had happened, but she was heavily judged by others in her community. It tore her apart and has affected her for over 40 years. Eleanor raised her 2 children and worked as a surgical technician throughout the years. Eleanor is now a grandmother, but says the guilt over her firstborn daughter still haunts her. She celebrates April's birthday by herself every year. Eleanor was quoted during an interview with the Washington Post as saying this, quote, There were times when I was younger when I wanted to commit suicide. I just felt so bad and so guilty. But my other kids were always my strength. Like, what would they do if anything happened to me? I just couldn't deal with everybody looking at me or talking about me and having something to say about my situation. It was always, she gave her baby away. People were always whispering that, or she's just not fit to have a child. I mean, the way people are, they're cruel, they're mean, until something happens to them. End quote. April was just 3 months old when she was kidnapped in broad daylight. She would be 41 years old today. April's abductor was using the name LaToya, although that was likely not her real name, or she possibly even changed her name after the fact. She is described as an African-American woman who stood about 5'3" tall with red braided hair in 1983. She's also described as having a dark brown complexion with pigment spots on her face. She was estimated to be in her 20s at the time with a very slender build. Her ears were pierced with 2 holes in each ear. She was wearing green pants and a white ski jacket with a purple floral lining. April was just 3 months old, and the only distinguishing feature we may have on her is that she had a birthmark on her wrist that was actually in a straight line. What do you think happened to April Nicole Wiliams? Do you think she's alive out there somewhere, unaware of who she is, unaware that she was kidnapped and is an abducted baby from 1983? Anyone with information on the case is asked to call the Washington D.C. Metropolitan Police Department at 202-727-9099 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843-5678. That's 1-800-THE-LOST. Thank you so much for listening to April and Eleanor's story today. A sad, tragic story, but a story that is hopeful that April was possibly able to still live a good life and still is out there living a good life. Thank you for supporting our show as a subscriber or as a patron. We couldn't keep doing this without all of your support. This case was a little different than our usual stories, but her story touched me, and the mainstream media has said they will continue to share her story every year. Cold case detectives in Washington, D.C. still have high hopes that one day they will have answers on this case. Please remember to send over your case suggestions, cold cases, or current cases. You can always send them over to me on social media or email me anytime at canwefindthem@gmail.com. We will be back again very soon with another unsolved missing persons case. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.